When you look at the grand scale of the universe, humans are relatively helpless. There is so much that could happen in the blink of an eye that we would be powerless to stop. A solar storm could wipe out all of our electronics, or an asteroid could come out of nowhere and obliterate us the same way as the dinosaurs. Humans can't stop any natural disaster regardless of the size. However, it's pretty frightening to see just how many natural disasters could happen in the near future that would impact nations in untold ways. All we could do is look at the carnage and hope for the best. Here are 5 such natural disasters that humans simply cannot prevent. We've talked about Yellowstone a lot on this channel, but it's worth bringing up again for just how massive it would be if the caldera finally went off. While people are quick to say that Yellowstone is overdue for an eruption, the truth is a bit more complicated. Volcanoes don't work in predictable patterns, so it could go off in the next year, or it could go off in 1,000 years. It's really up to the hands of fate. But what happens when Yellowstone finally erupts? If the volcano went off on a massive scale, then it would completely cover the states of Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and Idaho in 3 feet of ash. A mix of glass and broken rocks would cover much of the Midwest, and this would wreak havoc on our food production. That kind of ash would kill most plant and animal life in the area. It would also short-circuit electrical equipment and crush roofs. Multiple states would have to contend with damaged buildings and minimal electrical power, but the effects would be felt around the country. While states further away from the volcano wouldn't see the same level of ash, it's likely that a massive eruption would spew debris from coast to coast. A precise distribution pattern would be dependent on the time of year of the eruption as well as weather patterns at the time. Air travel would need to shut down across much, if not all, of the United States. It's also possible for the world to experience a cooling period from this event. Volcanoes can spew sulfur aerosols that reflect sunlight, and there's a history of volcanic eruptions cooling the planet by as much as 1 degree Fahrenheit. This is a worst-case scenario. It's possible when Yellowstone erupts next, it will be much smaller in scale, but the impact to the immediate area would be immense regardless. Mount Fuji in Japan has erupted about 180 times over the last 5,600 years. Many of these have been minor, with the last huge eruption taking place in 1707. This particular eruption created over 28.2 billion cubic feet of volcanic ash, which traveled as far as 62 miles and remained in the air for 2 weeks after the initial blast. It's entirely possible that another eruption of the same scale could happen again. However, now the area around Mount Fuji is much more heavily populated. In 2020, the Japanese government released the results of a simulation showing what would transpire if Mount Fuji erupted today. The worst-case scenario found from the simulation estimated that roughly 17.3 billion cubic feet of volcanic ash would spread over Tokyo as well as surrounding cities. Ash would fall over the city in as little as 3 hours, with Tokyo needing to be shut down within the first day. Roads would need to be blocked off, and planes would be unable to land. The debris would also cause power outages and disrupt mobile phone towers, making it difficult for citizens to learn additional information about next steps. The accumulated ash would also pose threats to anyone living in wooden homes, which are popular in the region. It's also likely that a volcanic eruption would lead to a number of other secondary disasters. For example, ash could block natural dams in the Sakawa River, flooding multiple areas. The goal of these simulations is to help local governments prepare as much as possible to try to minimize damage when the volcano does go off. There is no way to stop it, but communities can take action to somewhat reduce the threat level. If you live on the west coast of the United States, then you probably hear the phrase "the big one" thrown around a lot. It refers to the day when the San Andreas Fault inevitably experiences an earthquake, and a large enough tremor would be enough to destroy massive portions of California, Oregon, and Washington. All it would take for the big one to arise would be a 7.8 magnitude earthquake striking along the San Andreas Fault. And to be honest, it's only a matter of time before it occurs. There's nothing humans can do to stop plate tectonics, and big earthquakes tend to happen on the southern San Andreas Fault line once every 45 to 230 years. It's been 161 years since the last big quake occurred. A 7.8 magnitude earthquake along the San Andreas Fault may only last a minute, but it would decimate the region. Some predictions for this event estimate that 1,800 people would die immediately, with 1,600 fires igniting throughout the area. Many people would become trapped inside buildings that have collapsed, and over 270,000 people would be displaced from their homes. Search and rescue efforts would last weeks trying to find survivors among the wreckage, with thousands more needing to go to ER for injuries. If you ever find yourself in the midst of a massive earthquake, the best advice is to drop, cover, and get yourself under a desk or table. Hurricanes are rated on the Category 1 to 5 Saffir-Simpson scale, with 5 being the most intense. Category 5 hurricanes are already rather rare, with only about 7% of hurricanes reaching such a status. However, they are possible and do happen. In 2019, Hurricane Dorian had gusts with speeds of up to 220 miles per hour. Many scientists believed that this should have given Dorian the rating of Category 6 if it only existed. Some scientists believe it's time to change the scale because stronger hurricanes are only going to become more prevalent as the years go on. A combination of more water in the Earth's atmosphere with warmer ocean water creates the ideal conditions for these immense hurricanes to develop. While unofficial Category 6 hurricanes have popped up around the world, one has never made it to the United States, but it's likely only a matter of time. A Category 5 hurricane is already capable of destroying telephone poles, houses, buildings, and more. It's one of the most destructive forces of nature humans can experience, and a Category 6 would be even stronger. Lives would be lost, and homes would be destroyed. But aside from making the hurricane sound more menacing, there are some who believe changing the categories is irrelevant. The Saffir-Simpson scale only accounts for a storm's maximum sustained wind speed. It doesn't take into account storm surge or rainfall. Still, no one should ever have to experience the wrath of a storm where winds exceed 200 miles per hour. Every day, the planet is struck by about 17 meteors. These rocks tend to mostly burn up in the atmosphere. When they do reach the surface, they're usually small enough to not cause any real damage. Plus, since most of the planet's surface is covered by ocean, most simply land there with no real repercussions. However, the possibility of a meteor of substantial size striking Earth's surface is possible, and it would decimate wherever it landed. For instance, a meteor the size of a small house would release about 20 kilotons of energy. That's about the equivalent of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. It would flatten buildings within a half-mile away, pretty much destroying the city where it landed. But what would happen if a meteor about a mile wide were to hit Earth? At that point, it would release approximately 1 million megatons of energy, which is 10 million times greater than the bomb at Hiroshima. Everything within 100 miles of ground zero would be obliterated. And at this point, we would have a scenario about the equivalent of what caused the dinosaurs to go extinct. If the meteor struck land, then it would kick up enough debris to block out the sun, causing most living things on the planet to die out. Fortunately, organizations are working on methods to hopefully protect the planet if such a meteor were ever on a collision course. Theoretically, a meteor could be knocked off course with a spacecraft or destroyed with a nuclear weapon. But since these methods haven't been tried before, it's all hypothetical. And as of this moment, we're still pretty much helpless against threats from space. If you have any natural disasters you want us to cover in a future video, then be sure to let us know what it is in the comments down below. Otherwise, be sure to click the link on screen to check out another one of our videos. With that said, thanks for watching, and be sure to tune in next time.